Hey everyone, my name is Doug Paul, and I am an innovation strategist with an organization called Catapult that I help co lead. We work with churches, denominations, networks, missions agencies, and nonprofits, and things like that. And the last 6 months have been crazy, right? None of us were thinking that 2020 was going to be the year of a global pandemic that would flip everything upside down. And I think most of us in March were not thinking that in I don't know, in the span of 72 hours that everything was going to have to shift online. And then there's been like openings and closings, and we're not quite sure what to do. And even now, going into the fall with rolling openings and closings, depending on whether you've got a hotspot or not, this is not the year that we were thinking about. And I think one of the things that I want us to think about is just asking the question, like, why is innovation so critical? Because I think we recognize now that's really really important, because all of us have had to innovate on a dime, right? Like, there are these two words that we probably never want to say ever again: unprecedented and pivot. If we have to say pivot or unprecedented one more time, we're probably going to pull our hair out and scream. So I think there's something about innovation where we get that it's critical because we've had to do it. It was innovate or die. Like, the church wouldn't function if we didn't innovate quickly because of COVID. And I think one of the interesting things that we've been faced with is there's this principle in innovation called the principle of beautiful constraint. And the idea is this: that when you want to think about the future, or you want to think about change, or you want to think about innovation or creativity, one of the least helpful things that you can do is to start with a blank piece of paper, where you're like, all right, it's just going to be blue sky thinking, anything's possible, go. Like, that's actually really unhelpful. There's and what the principle of beautiful constraint is saying, hey, what if we put some things in place that constrain what we can do, and that would actually force us to think differently. So I'll give you an example of what this can look like. I want you to imagine that a global pandemic makes churches unable to meet for 6 months in person. How would the church still be successful and faithful? Go. Well, that's the principle of beautiful constraint. It's putting something that almost feels ridiculous on top of us, right? And forces us to think differently. Except for us in 2020, everything has been different. And so in the fall, we launched some coaching groups, and over about a 2 month period, we were working with about 10,000 churches. And one of the things that we noticed over and over and over again was that churches were, and the leaders of those churches were really struggling to make those changes, to make that pivot, which, again, word that we would never like to say again. And one of the reasons for that is innovation in making those adaptations and those tweaks. That's actually a skill set. In the same way that preaching is a skill set, in the same way that organizing your staff, there's skill in that. Running meetings are a skill. Running programmings, that's a skill. Learning to innovate, that's a skill in and of itself, and it's a kind of muscle that very few leaders have had to grow. And what I want to say is that coming out of like those thousands of leaders that we've worked with is that, one, most of those leaders did not have that muscle yet. But two, having worked with them, you can grow it, and you can grow it fast. And I'm going to give you one thing that you can do, I think, in the next 3 to 12 months that's going to really help you grow that muscle. But before I do it, I want to tell you why I think this is so important post-COVID. Because at some point, we're going to be on the other side of this, right? And whether that's in 3 months, whether that is in 12 months, we're not exactly sure. But we will be on the other side of this. And here's why I think this is so important on the other side of COVID. It used to be that there would be changes that would happen generationally, And those changes would happen every 20 to 25 years. And so you're probably familiar with the term generational change. And there are things that would change in a group of people from one group or cultural to one group or culture to another that would be significant cultural changes. And those generational changes would happen roughly every 20 to 25 years. What has happened in the last 10 to 15 years is this. Those generational changes, those things that are fundamentally upending culture, they're now happening every 18 months. In other words, what we used to experience every 20 to 25 years is now happening every 18 months. That is how fast our culture is flipping and reinventing itself. And there are lots of reasons for that, and we can maybe talk through that at another time. But here's my point. If the church is going to remain faithful to its call of following Jesus into this world that he so loved, representing the mission of Jesus, it's going to mean that we need to adapt and we need to change. Now, I don't mean change like with the world, but I do mean that the church, to be faithful, as faithful representatives of the gospel, we have an opportunity to represent the King in this world that he so loved in ways that actually connect and show how the gospel is good news and embody that good news to other people. But how do we do that if the world is flipping and culture is changing every 18 months? And I think that's why this idea of kingdom innovation is so critically important. In the same way that Sunday school was a wild kingdom innovation when it first came onto the scene in the 1750s. Or why something like Alcoholics Anonymous, it flipped the world upside down. It is one of the greatest social innovations in human history. We think about things perhaps like Alpha. Like, what an incredible innovation. And we can just keep going and going and going. Like, we are not done innovating. The church's best years are not in the rear view mirror. They're ahead of us. But only if we learn to follow Jesus in what it is that he is doing and grow that skill of kingdom innovation. And so I want to share just one thing that you can do that I think is going to be really helpful for you in the next, let's say, 3 to 12 months. I think it would be really helpful if you determine in the next year, what are 3 experiments that you want to try? Maybe you've always had a slow hunch or a half idea where you just said to yourself, man, I just feel like if we tried this, then something could happen. Or this would happen. Or this thing over here, I've always found that really interesting. I'd love to try something with that. But here's the thing. Don't do it with your entire church. Just try it with a couple of people. And maybe you don't have to be the person that tries it. Maybe there's this group of pioneering people who are always itching to try something new. Go send them off to do something. Try 3 experiments that are very specific, and you will know if they succeed or if they fail. Try 3 of them. And then of those 3, I can almost promise you that one of them is really going to work. So try 3 experiments, and then take one of them and implement it into the church as part of your cultural norm in the year coming after that experimental year. If you can do that, that's just a simple way of measuring things that you're trying, things that you're experimenting, ways that you can iterate and you can bring innovation into the life of your church. If you can make that increasingly normal, then you're going to be able to find that you are increasingly adaptive, that you're going to be increasingly able to meet the moment, whatever the moment might be. All right, thanks for watching. Hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for spending. At least for me, this is it's kind of an overcast day outside. The sun actually just came out. You can see it brightened. Hope you have a great day, and we will see you soon.